Hello. Welcome to Coffee with Cal. Alright, today we're gonna be doing something a little bit different. And it's not gaming. Crazy, crazy, crazy. My throat is feeling a bit, parched. I keep drinking water, but it's still feeling a bit scratchy. So, there's that. But yeah, today we're gonna be reading Rise of Kyoshi. I've had this idea for a while that I wanted to read a book on stream. So now I'm enacting out that idea. Let me turn down this music for me, which means I'll need to boost it up for you. Because it's at a low level for you guys. Because you just get my desktop audio. So yeah, these are the lo-fi beats. I'll talk over them, obviously, as I'm reading. But every now and then you might end up hearing a Spotify ad because I don't have premium. But yeah, so to set the scene today, obviously got this intro that I made when I originally played, like, I don't know, like, was it? It must have been maybe last year? Beginning of last year, maybe? Sometime last year. I made this little intro screen on the screen right now. And that was for Infernus's Minecraft server. And, you know, I just thought, like, the title's relevant. It's like, grab a coffee, you know, chill out. Now, technically I'm not drinking coffee, but, you know, I do drink a lot of coffee, so there's probably some residual coffee in my system. I would love a hot drink, but I don't actually own a kettle. I mean, I've got hot water. I can boil some, but that's a lot of effort. I only really do that stuff from going out. So, like, cups of teas and coffees are very rare for me. But, yeah, today, I've got some things, some transitions to set the scene a little bit more. And that's gonna be like, hey, when I'm reading the book, I'll probably cut to this, which is a little intro that, well, it's not an intro, but a little background that I made like quite a while ago. Because I was on like an Avatar kind of hype train, watching all the series and stuff. So we've got this one that's Earth that I've made, and it's a little bit animated. Stuck some titles in on top over OBS. But yeah, that'll just be looping. We've also got Fire, which is a bit more visually influxed with movement. Hold on, I'm clicking off these sources because it annoys me when I can see it on OBS. Another one I've got is also Water, which is a lot more animated. Got a little water spirit going side to side. But, you know, I can't use this one on a loop because it doesn't work in a loop. It was intended for a video, I think. Of all four of these, like, there'd be whatever fire one going on there, whatever earth creature going on there, like spirits or animals. I never did an airbending one, but I've read like probably 1/3 of the book quite a long time ago. Probably like a year, probably like 10-ish months ago or something. Maybe 9-ish months. And yeah, so that's how far I got to the book through it. So I know a little bit about the book, and like just basically I'd gotten past like the starting events. We were moving into the actual mid climaxes of the book. like setting up villains and stuff just after that bit. But yeah, I won't stay on that too long because it's not very good. I'll go back to the me intro one for now until I start reading, I guess. But yeah, that's the plan for the day stream. I might be shorter. Could go on for a while. I don't know. Just depends how I feel. I normally read for like an hour, and like I've had the idea of like, hey, I've not read in a while, and I've definitely not read aloud in a while. And you know, like obviously, I speak a load of gobbledygook, so maybe reading from a book with a bit more refined sentences will make me more refined. Maybe. But yeah, so like obviously when I'm reading this book in my head, there's a lot of semi-Japanese words, Japanese inspired words in it, like names and names of places. But I'll have trouble pronouncing them. So what I might do, I don't know. It just depends how much it breaks the immersion. But I'll get like how to pronounce a word Google Translator up, and then just like hear the robot speak the word, and then we'll see if I'm pronouncing it right. But I won't do that for all of them. Like if I'm like 80% correct on the wording, I'll just go with that. But hold on, let's crank this music up a bit. Yeah, The Rise of Kyoshi, Part 1. Like, I love the animated series of Avatar, The Last Airbender. I think I like The Legend of Korra more. Like, it's a bit more. It's got a few more adult film themes in there, like so it just sort of resonates better with me, I think. And I think like, hold on, I thought I could hear my phone vibrating. Yeah, Legend of Korra I like over The Last Airbender, but you know, where was I going with that? Where was I going with that? But yeah, that was it. I think the endings of seasons are really well resolved. I know they're like planning to make like loads more new Avatar stuff, so that's gonna be cool. I just hope it has the same sort of integrity as the other things, the other two shows. I know there's some like comics and mangas out there as well, so I've tried to get into them, but like I don't know, it's if it's not physical, or I don't know, like if it's too much of a hassle to like find the time to do, then yeah, it has a quick drop off point, but probably much like this book did, as I just like moved on to other things, and just I think it wasn't long after I decided I was going to leave my last job as well, so there's that too. That's probably why I stopped going to like reading this, because what I would do is like after work I would go to like the park, or yeah it was the park mainly, and just like there was like I like reading in high places, and there's like a bridge, but there's like the foundation of the bridge is like quite high, so you can like sit on the edge, and it's like a fair few feet of a drop, so it's nice to just like hang out there and read, you know. Yeah, that's the plan. So, do I need to say anything more? Yeah. So the book, this is set before any of the shows happened. So this is before Aang, and this is obviously focusing on Kyoshi, who is briefly mentioned in the last Avatar, the last Airbender. So you know, I'm sure my reading levels dropped because I don't do it as often as I did. So excuse me if there's any mid pauses, because what they do quite a lot in this book as well is like they'll like cut off half the word and then pull it on the next sentence, which whenever I'm writing something, I'll go to death and beyond to make sure like that doesn't happen. But it seems to happen quite a lot in this book. So if there's any like mid pauses as my eyes like gaze down to the next sentence, that's probably why. I'll be like contradiction. But we'll see how big the millisecond gap is. Yeah, I will open the book. I've only got the part 1 book here with me. Like, obviously I'm not going to get through it all. No guarantee that I'll even read it all. But, you know, we'll get through some chapters. I'll end on a chapter, not just like midway through a page. That's me opening the book. So yeah, Rise of Kyoshi, FCE, with Avatar co-director Michael Dante DiMattro. So yeah, obviously it's a Western IP, but it's very Eastern in its inspirations. I need to read the. No, I'm not gonna read that. Like the author telling you a message. Right, the book is open. I am on the first chapter. Alright, let's switch to this one. Let's switch to this one. Booyah. If I had like an alpha of the cow, I would also put it in like the background. But I don't, I think. That would be something I need to sort out once I get me Adobe back. But yeah, let's begin, shall we? Right. Oh, there's the Spotify advert. I don't want to start in the Spotify advert. It's kind of screwed up. Right. Is this still not? This is still an advert, so I've got to talk over it and just like make noises because it's trying to convince me to gamble, I guess. Which you know, don't want to start the story on like some forced advert butting its way in, even though it's probably not that laudable. Maybe even just a little bit up. Oh, the National Lottery. Oh, I said it. That just supports it more. Right, I think we're back to the music now. Right. So this is the first chapter, The Test. Yokai-Port was a town easy to overlook, situated on the edge of White-Tail Strait. It could have been a major restocking point for ships leaving one of the many harbours that supplied Omeshu. I swear I said this right before. Omashu. Right. But the strong, reliable, prevailing winds made it too easy and cost-effective for southbound merchants to cruise right past it and reach Shimsum Big Island in a straight shot. Jinsu wondered if the locals knew or cared that ships laden with riches sailed tantalizingly close by, while they were struck elbow deep in the captivity of another elephant's koi. Only a quirk of fate and weather kept piles of gold. Only a quirk of fate and weather kept piles of gold, spices, precious books, and scrolls from landing on their doorstep. Instead, their lot was fish guts, a wealth of moors and gills. The landward side was even less promising. The soil of the peninsula grew thin and rocky as it extended further into the next page sea. It had disturbed Jinsu to see crop fields so meager and balding as he rode through the country into town for the first time. The farmland lacked the wild volcanic abundance of the Makipu Valley, or the carefully ordered productivity of Ba Sing Se's outer ring, where growth bent to the exacting will of the king's planners. Here, a farmer would have to be grateful for whatever substance they could pull from the dirt. The settlement lay at the intersection of three different nations, earth, air, and water, and yet none had ever laid much of a claim to it. The conflicts of the outside world had little impact on daily life for the Yokanians. To them, the ravages of the Yellowneck Uprising in the deep interior of the Earth Kingdom were a less interesting story than the wayward flying bison that had gotten loose from the Air Temple and knocked the thatching off a few roofs last week. Despite being seagoers, they probably couldn't name any of the dreaded pirates' leaders carving up the eastern waters in open defiance of Ba Sing Se's navy. All in all, Yokkaya Port might as well have not been on the map, which meant for Ginseng and Kalsang, desperate sacrifice, what the hell? Desperate, sacrilegious little experiment. It was perfect. Right, I feel like keep forgetting this. Right, I've reached a break there, but I feel like I keep mispronouncing that name. So just to double check, we're gonna go to Google Translate. Oh, come on. Alright. Yeah. Typing Google on Google it's just a bit of a delay. Translate. It always automatically goes to French for some reason.
Jianju.
I feel like that's saying it wrong. Jianju. Right. Jianju. Okay. Alright, sorry for that little break there, but it's important to get the names right. Jianju trudged uphill in the wet, mucky snowfall, his neck prickling from the bundled straw cloak around his shoulders. He passed the wooden pillar that marked the spiritual center of this village without sparing it a glance. There was nothing on the sides or on the top of it. It was just a bare log driven upwards into the ground. A circular a circular courtyard. It wasn't carved with any decorations, which seemed lazy for a town where nearly every adult had a working knowledge of carpentry. There, the post originally said to any nearby spirits, "Hope you're happy." Weathered houses lined the board, eroded avenues poking steeply into the air like spear points. Whose destination was the larger two-story meeting hall at the end. Kelsang had set up shop there yesterday, saying he needed as much floor space as possible for the test. He also claimed that the location enjoyed some auspicious wind currents, using the very solemn and holy method of licking his finger and holding it up in the air. Whatever helped. I've already forgotten how do you say his name? Oh, I swore. Probably isn't to swear at him in this. No, sort of lowers. Jianju. I should just keep that open. Jianju. I'm gonna get some water in here. I'll get some in a bit. Alright. Weathered houses lined the broad, eroded avenue, poking steeply into the air like spear points. I'm gonna burp. Okay, sorry about that. Right. Weathered houses lined the broad, eroded avenue, poking steeply into the air like spear points. His destination was the larger two-story meeting hall at the end. Kelsang had set up shop there yesterday, saying he needed as much floor space as possible for the test. He also claimed that the location enjoyed some auspicious wind currents, using the very solemn and holy method of licking his finger and holding it up in the air. Whatever helped. Jianju sent a quick prayer to the guardian of the divine log as he pulled off his snow boots, laid them out on the porch, and ducked through the door curtains. The interior of the hall was surprisingly large, with far corners draped in the shadow, and thick planked walls cut from what must have been truly massive trees. The air smelled of resin. 10 very long, very faded yellow cloths stretched across the warm floorboards, as a row of toys laid on each one, evenly spaced like a seabed. A bison whistle, a wicker ball, a misshapen blob that might have been a stuffed turtle duck, a coiled whalebone spring, one of those flappy drums that made noise as you spun it back and forth between your palms. The toys looked as worn and beaten as the outside of this building. Kelsang knelt at the far end of the cloths. The airbender monk was busy placing more knickknacks with a carefulness and precision that rivaled an acupuncturist setting that needles... I'll do that again. And precision that rivaled an acupuncturist setting their needles as if it was mattered whether the miniature boat sailed east or west. He stayed on his hands and knees, shuffling his grate. Hi Twitching, turning the page. Yeah, I'm doing a book reading thing. Just a experiment. Hold on, I'll start from the beginning of the sentence. Stayed on his hands and knees, shuffling his grate bulk sideways, his billowing orange robes and wiry black beard hanging so low that they made another sweep over a floor that had already been scrubbed clean. I didn't know there were so many toys, Jianju said to his old friend. He spotted a large white marble that looked too close to the edge of the fabric, and, with a graceful extension of his wrist, levitated it with earthbending in front of Kelsang. It hovered like a fly, waiting for his attention. Kelsang didn't look as he was plucked at... Kelsang didn't look up as he plucked the marble out of the air, and put it right back where it had started. There's thousands I ask you to help, but you wouldn't do it right. Everybody's Scottish for some reason. It's just, I don't know, it's just coming to me. Alright. Jianju's head hurt at the statement. At this point, they were well past doing it right. How did you change Abbot Dori's mind about giving you the relics, he asked. The same way you convinced Li Bongfu to let us administer the air nomad test in the Earth cycle, Kelsang said calmly as he recentered a wooden top. I didn't. Like a certain friend of theirs from the water tribe always said, it was better to ask for forgiveness than wait for permission. And as far as Jianju was concerned, the time for waiting had long passed. When Avatar Kuruk, the keeper of balance and peace in the world, the bridge between spirits and humans, passed away at the ripe old age of 33. 33! The only time Kuruk had ever been early for anything. It became the duty of his friends, his teachers, and other prominent benders to find the new avatar, reincarnated into the next nation of the element cycle: earth, fire, air, water, and then earth again. An order as unchanging as the seasons. An order as unchanging as the seasons, a process stretching back nearly 1,000 generations before Kuruk, and one that would hopefully continue for 1,000 more. Except this time, it wasn't working. It had been 7 years since Kuruk's death, 7 years of fruitless searching. Jianju had pored over every available record of the four nations going back hundreds of years, and the hunt for the Avatar had never faltered like this in documented history. No one knew why. The revered elders traded guesses behind closed doors. The world was impure and had been abandoned by the spirits. The Earth Kingdom lacked cohesion, or maybe it was the water tribes in the poles that needed to unify. The airbenders had to come down from their mountains and get their hands dirty instead of preaching. The debate went on and on. Jianju cared less about appropriating blame and more about the fact that he and Kelsang had let down their friend again. The only serious decree of Kuruk's before he had departed from the living was that his closest companions find his next avatar and do right by them. And so far they failed. Spectacularly, right now, there should have been a happy, burbling 7-year-old earthbender in the care of their loving family being watched over by a collection of the best, wisest benders of the world. The Scottish show Avatar. Like, trying to remember, like, if I go away and come back to this, or, like, try and remember somebody's voice, it might drastically change. It'd be friggin' Indian next, doesn't it? Where was I? I kind of looked away for a second. Of the world. A child in the midst of being prepared for the assumption of their duties at the age of 16. Instead, there was only a gaping void that grew more dangerous by the day. Jianju and other masters did their best to keep the missing avatar a secret, but there was no use. The cruel, the power hungry? Well, hold on. The book's kind of... It's done 2 words, but there's no space. Right, I'll read that again. The cruel, the power-hungry, the lawless people who normally had the most to fear from the Avatar were starting to feel the scales shifting in their favor. Like sand sharks responding to the slightest vibrations on pure instinct. They tested their limits, probed new grounds. Time was running out. Kelsang finished setting up when the noon gong struck. The sun was high enough to melt snow off the roof, and the dripping flow of the water pattered on the ground like light rain. The silhouettes of villagers and the children queuing up for the test could be seen outside, through the paper screen windows. The air was full of excitement. No more waiting, Jianju thought. This happens now. Earth avatars were traditionally identified by directional geomancy, a series of rituals designed to winnow through the largest and most populous of the 4 nations as efficiently as possible. Each time a special set of bone trigrams was cast and interpreted by the earthbending messages. Half the Earth Kingdom was ruled out as a location of the no-born avatar. Then from the remaining territory, another half, and then another half again. The possible locations kept shrinking until the searchers were brought to the doorstep of the Earth Avatar child. I need a drink. Getting parched. Scratchy throat. So, very quick. Get water. Sorry about that. Unpleasant noises. So yeah, we got a bit of a little break in the chapter there. But so basically, Jianzhu and Kelsang, they're looking for the Avatar. And they're not having any luck. And it's been a long time. It was a quick way to cover ground and entirely fitting to the earth-bending state of mind. A question of logistics, simple to the point of being brutal. And it normally worked on the first try. Jianzhu had been part of expeditions sent by the Bones to barren fields, empty gem caravans below Ba Sing Se, a patch of the Saiwang Desert, so dry that not even in the sandbenders both bothered with it. Liu Beifong had reached the trigrams. King Boro of Omishma gave it a shot. Ni Leo, the gardener, took her turn. The masters worked their way through the earthbending hierarchy until... God. The word doesn't look like anything how it's pronounced.
Jianzhu.
Jianzhu. Got a Z in. Jianzhu. The earth-bending hierarchy, until Jianzhu racked up his fair share of misses as well. His friendship with Kuruk brought him no special privileges when it came to the next avatar. After the last attempt had placed him on an iceberg in the North Pole with only turtle seals as potential candidates, Jianzhu became open to radical suggestions. A drunken person with Kelsing spawned a promising new idea. If the ways of the Earth Kingdom weren't working, why not try another nation's method? After all, wasn't the Avatar the bender of all four elements? An honorary citizen of the entire world? That was why the two of them were wiping their noses with tradition and trying the air nomad way of identifying the Avatar. Yokio would be a practice run, a safe place far from the turmoil of land and sea where they could take notes and fix problems. If Yokiai went smoothly, they could convince their elders to expand the test further throughout the Earth Kingdom. The Air Nomad's method was simple, in theory. Out of the many toys laid out, only 4 belonged to avatars of eras gone by. Each 7-year-old child of the village would be brought in and presented with a dazzling array of playthings. The one who was drawn to the 4 special toys, in a remembrance of their past lives, was the Avatar Reborn, a process as elegant and harmonious as the airbenders themselves, in theory. In practice, it was chaos, pure and unhinged. It was disaster, the likes of which the 4 nations had never witnessed. Jianzhu hadn't thought of what might happen after the children who failed the test were told to leave their selections behind and make room for the next candidate. The tears, the wailing, the screaming, trying to get toys away from kids who had only had moments before been promised that they could have their pick. There was no force in existence stronger than a child's righteous fury at being robbed. The parents were worse. Maybe air nomad caretakers handled the rejection of their young ones with grace and humility, but families in other nations weren't made up of monks and nuns. Especially in the Earth Kingdom, where all bets were off once it came to blood ties. Villagers, whom he'd shared friendly greetings with in the days leading up to the test, became snarling canyon crawlers once they had been told that the precious little Marid was not in fact the most important child in the world, as they'd secretly known all along. More than a few sworn up and down that they had seen their offspring play with the invisible spirits or bend earth and air at the same time, Kelseng would push back gently. Are you sure your child wasn't earthbending during a normal breeze? Are you sure the baby wasn't simply playing? Some couldn't take a hint, especially the village captain. As soon as they passed over her daughter, Anoma, or something, she'd given them a look of utter contempt and demanded to see a higher-ranking master. Sorry, lady, Jianzu thought after Kelseng spent nearly 10 minutes talking her down. We can't all be special. For the last time, I'm not negotiating a salary with you, Jianzu shouted in the face of a particularly blunt farmer. Being the avatar is not a paid position. The stocky man shrugged. Sounds like a waste of time then. I'll take my child and go. Out of the corner of his eye, Jianzu caught Kelseng frantically waving his hands, making a cut-off sign at the neck. The little girl had wandered over to the whirly flying toy that had once entertained an ancient avatar, and was staring at it intently. They weren't intending to get a genuine result today, but picking the first item correctly was already improbable. Too probable to risk stopping now. Okay, Jianzu said. This would have to come out of his own pocket. 50 silvers a year if she's the avatar. 60 silvers a year if she's the avatar, and 10 if she's not. Why would I pay you if she's not the avatar? Jianzu roared. Kelseng coughed and thumped loudly on the floor. The girl had picked up whirling and was... What the hell? Whirling-gigging. I've never seen this word before. Had picked up the whirligig and was eyeing the drum. 2 out of 4 correct. Out of thousands. Holy shoot. I mean, of course, Jiangsu said quickly. Deal. They shook hands. It would be ironic, a prank worthy of Kuruk's sense of humor, to have his reincarnation to be found as a result of a peasant's greed. And the very last child in line for testing to boot, Jiansu nearly chuckled. Now the girl had the drum in her arms as well. She walked over to a stuffed hog monkey. Kelseng was beside himself with excitement, his neck threatening to burst through the wooden head beads wrapped around it. Jiansu felt lightheaded, hope bashed against his ribcage, begging to be let out after so many years of trapped inside. The girl wound up her foot and stomped on the stuffed animal as hard as she could. She screamed, "Die!" in a little, trembling voice. She ground it under her heel, the stitches orderly ripping. The light went out of Kelsing's face. He looked like he'd witnessed a murder. 10 silvers, the farmer said. Get out, Jiansu snapped. Come on, Susie, the farmer called. Let's go. After wrestling the other toys away from the butcher of hog monkeys, he scooped the girl up and walked out the door. The whole escapade, nothing but a business transaction. In doing so, he nearly bowled over another child who'd been spying on the proceedings from the outside. "Here," Jiangsu said. "You forgot your other daughter." "That one ain't mine," the farmer said, as he thumped down the steps into the street. "That one ain't anyone's." An orphan then, Jiaxing hadn't spotted the unchaperoned girl around town in the days before. But maybe he glossed over her, thinking she was too old to be a candidate. She was much, much taller than any of the other children who had been brought in by their parents. As Jiansu... It's gone again. As Jianju hadn't spotted as Jianju walked over to examine what he missed. The girl quavered, threatening to flee, but her curiosity won over her fright. She remained where she was. Undeterred, Jianzu thought with a frown as he looked over at the girl's hollow cheeks and cracked lips. And definitely an orphan. He'd seen hundreds of children like her in the inner provinces, where outlawed Diafian ran unchecked, their parents slain by whatever bandit group was ascendant in the territory. She must have wandered far into the relatively peaceful area of Yukya. Upon hearing about the Avatar test, the families of the villagers had dressed their elbow children in their finest garments, as if they were a festival day, but this child was wearing a threadbare coat with her elbows poking through the holes in the sleeves. Her oversized feet threatened to burst the straps of her two small sandals. None of the local farmers were feeding or clothing her. Kelseng, who, despite her fearsome appearance, was always better with children, joined them and swooped down. With a smile, he transformed from an imitating orange mountain into a giant-sized version of the stuffed toys behind him. "Why, hello there," he said, putting an extra layer of friendliness into his booming rumble. "What's your name?" The girl took a long, guarded moment, sizing them up. "Kyoshi," she whispered. Her eyebrows nodded, as if to reveal her name was painful. Kelsing took her tattered state and avoided the subject of her parents for now. "Kyoshi, would you like a toy?" "Are you sure she isn't too old?" Jiansu said. "She's bigger than some of the teenagers." "Push you," Kensug said. He made a sweeping gesture at the hole fastened with relics, for Kyoshi's benefit. The unrevealing of so many playthings at once had an entrancing effect on most of the children, but Kyoshi didn't gasp, didn't smile, or move a muscle. Instead, she maintained eye contact with Kelsang until he blinked. As quick as a whip, she scampered up by him, snagged an object off the floor, and ran back to where she was standing on the porch. She gauged Kelseng and Jiansu's for their response as intently as they watched her. Kelseng glanced at Jiangsu and tilted his head, as if the clay turtle Kyoshi clutched to her chest, one of the 4 true relics. Not a single candidate had come anywhere near it today. They should have been excited for her as they had been for the evil little girl from before. But Jiangsu's heart was clouded with doubt. It was hard to believe that they were so lucky after their previous head fake. "Good choice," Kelseng said. "But I've got a surprise for you. You can't have 3 more. You can have 3 more. 4 whole toys to yourself. Wouldn't you like that?" Jiangsu sensed a shift in the girl's stance, a tremor in her foundation that was obviously through the wooden floorboards. Yes, she would like 3 more toys very much. What child wouldn't? But in her mind, the promise of more was dangerous. A lie designed to hurt her. If she loosened her grip on the single prize she held right now, she would end up with nothing, punished for believing in the kindness of strangers. Kyoshi shook her head, her knuckles whitened around the clay turtle. It's okay, Kelsing said. You don't have to put that down. The whole point, you can choose different... Hey! The girl took a step back, and then another, and then, before they could react, she was sprinting down the hill with the one-of-a-kind, centuries-old avatar relics in her hands. Halfway along the street, she took a sharp turn, like an experienced fugitive throwing off a pursuer, and disappeared into the space between two houses. Jiansu closed his eyelids against the sun. The light came through them in scarlet blots. He could feel his own pulse. His mind was somewhere else right now. Instead of yokai, he stood in the center of an unnamed village deep in the interior of the Earth Kingdoms, newly liberated by Zukping An and the Yellownecks. In this walking dream, the stench of rotting flesh soaked through his clothes, and the cries of survivors hunted the wind. Next to him, an official messenger who had been carried there by palanquin read from a scroll, spending minute after minute listening to the Earth King's horrifics, only to end by telling Jiansu that reinforcements from His Majesty's army would not be coming to help. He tried to shake free of the memory, but the past had set its jagged hooks into him. Now he sat at a negotiating table made of pure ice, and on the other side was Tulok, lord of the Fifth Nation pirates. The elderly Corsair laughed his consumptive laugh at the notion that he might honor his grandfather's promise to leave the southern coastlines of the continent in peace. Take a drink. Yeah, this is the time that I actually checked that and unmute myself. Yeah, I did. His convulsions splattered blood and phlegm over the chords drafted by the avatar Yuk-Chen in her own holy hand, while his daughter Lieutenant watched by his side, her soulless gaze bored into Jiansu. The name's gone again. Jianju. Like, he was so much prey. In these times, and in many others, he should have been at the right hand of the Avatar. The ultimate authority who could have bent the world to their will. Instead, he was alone, facing down giant beasts of land and sea, their jaws closing in, encasing the kingdom in darkness. Kelsing yanked him back into the present with a bursting slap on the back. "Come on," he said. "With the way you look, people would think you just lost your nation's most important cultural artifact." The airbender's good humor and ability to take setbacks in stride was normally a great comfort to Jiansu. But right now, he wanted to punch his friend in his stupid, bearded face. He composed his own features. "We need to go after her then," he said. Kelsing pursed his lips. It'd feel bad to take the relic away from a child who has so little. She can hang on to it. I'll go back at the temple and face Doji's wrath alone. There's no need for you to implicate yourself." Jiansu didn't know what counted for wrath among airbenders, but that wasn't the issue here. "You'd ruin the airbender's nomad test to make a child happy," he said incredulously. "It'll find its way back to where it belongs." Kelsing looked around and paused. Then his smile faded, as if this little blot of a town were a harsh dose of reality that was only now taking effect. "Eventually. Maybe." Okay. Chapter 2, 9 years later. To Kyoshi, it was very clear that this was a hostage situation. Silence was the key to making it through to the other side. Waiting with complete and total passivity. Neutral Jing. Kyoshi walked calmly down the path through the fallow field, ignoring the cover glass that leaned over and tickled her ankles. The sweat beading on her forehead that stung her eyes, she kept quiet and pretended that the 3 people who had fallen in beside her, like muggers in an alley, weren't a threat. Hold on. Yeah. The book starts speech before telling you who's talking, which is a bit weird if you want to do like a little twist on the speech. So, like I was telling the others, my mom and dad think we have to dredge the Peakside canals earlier this year, Aruma said, drawing out the moms and dads intentionally dangling what Kyoshi lacked in front of her. She crooked her hands into the crowning bridge position while slamming her feet into the ground with solid warmth. One of the terraces collapsed in the last storm. Above them, flying high out of reach, was the last precious jar of pickled spicy kelp that the entire village would see this year. The one that Kyoshi had been charged with delivering to Jiansu's mansion, the one that Atoma had earthbent out of Kyoshi's hands, was now promising to drop at any second. The large clay vessel bobbed up and down, sloshing the brine against the waxed paper seal. Kyoshi had to stifle a yelp every time the jar lurched against the limits of Atoma's control. No noise, wait it out, don't give them anything to latch onto. Thinking it will only make it worse. She doesn't care, Sushi said. Precious Sevengil. I'm gonna not do Scottish for every accent. Precious Servicegill doesn't give a lick about farming matters. She's got her cushy job in the fancy house. She's too good to get her hands dirty. Won't step in a boat neither, Jay said. In lieu of elaborating further, he spat on the ground, nearly missing Kyoshi's heels. Atoma never needed a reason to torment Kyoshi, but as for the others, genuine resentment worked just fine. It was true that Kyoshi spent her days under the roof of a powerful sage instead of breaking her nails against field stones. She certainly never risked the choppy waters of the strait in pursuit of a catch. But what Jay and Suzu conveniently neglected was that every plot of admirable land near the village and every seaworthy boat down at the docks belonged to a family. Mothers and fathers, as Atoma was so fond of saying, passed along their trade to daughters and sons in an unbroken line, which meant there was no room for an outsider to inherit any means of survival. If it hadn't been for Kelsing and Jinsu, and oh my god, the name's gone again. Jianju. Kyoshi would have starved in the streets, right in front of everybody's noses. Hypocrites. Kyoshi pressed her tongue against the roof of her mouth as hard as she could. Today was not going to be the day. Someday maybe, but not today. Lay off her, Atoma said, shifting her stance into dividing bridge. I hear that being a serving girl is hard work. That's why we're helping with the deliveries. Isn't that right, Kyoshi? For emphasis, she threaded the jar through a narrow gap in the branches of an overhanging tree, a reminder of who was in control here. Kyoshi shrugged as the vessel drove towards the ground like a hawk before swooping back up to safety. Just a little farther, she thought, as the path took a sharp turn around the hillside. A few more silent, wordless steps until there, they had arrived at last. the Avatar's estate in all its glory. The mansion that Master Jianju built. The mansion that Master Jianju built, house the savior of the world, was designed in the image of a miniature city. A high wall ran in a perfect square around the grounds, with a division in the middle to separate the Austria training grounds from the vibrant living quarters. Each section had its own imposing, south-facing gatehouse that was larger than the yokai meeting hall. The massive iron-studded doors of the residential gate were flung open, offering a small windowed glimpse of the elaborate operation inside. A herd of the placid goat dogs grazed over the lawn, cropping the grass to an even length. Foreign elements had been carefully integrated into the design of the complex, which meant that gilded dragons chased carved polar orcas around the edge of the walls. Well, let's reread that sentence. Foreign elements had been carefully integrated into the design of the complex, which meant that the gilded dragons chased orcas around the edges of the walls. The placement of the Earth Kingdom-styled roof tiles cleverly matched air nomad numerology principles. Authentic dyes and paints had been imported from around the world, ensuring that the colours of all four nations were on full, equitably display. When Jiansu had brought the land, he explained to the village elders that yokai was an ideal spot to settle down and educate the Avatar. A quiet, safe place far away from the outlawed ravaged lands deeper in the Earth Kingdom, and close enough to both the southern border air temple and southern water tribe. The villagers had been happy enough to take his gold back then, but then after the mana went up, they grumbled that it was an eyesore, an alien creature that had sprouted overnight from the native soil. To Kyoshi, it was the most beautiful sight she could ever imagine. It was a home. Behind her, Zusu sniffed in disdain. I don't know what our parents were thinking, selling those fields to Janese. Koshi's lips went tight. Master Jiansu was indeed from the Ganjin tribe up in the north, but it was the way Jianzu had said it. Maybe they know the land. Hold on. Right, I need to. Maybe they knew the land was as worthless and unproductive as their children. Kyoshi muttered under her breath. The others stopped walking and stared at her. Whoops, she said that a bit too loud, hadn't she? Jay and Shizu balled their fists. It dawned on them what they could do while Atoma had Kyoshi helpless. It had been years since any of the village kids could get within arm's reach of her, but today was a special occasion, wasn't it? Maybe a few bruises in remembrance of old times. Kyoshi steeled herself for the first blow, rising on her toes, in hopes that she could at least keep her face out the fray. So Auntie May wouldn't notice. A few punches and kicks, and they'd leave her in peace. Really, it was her own fault for letting her mask slip. What do you think you're doing? A familiar voice snarled. Oh, right. Hold on. How can I do a voice for the voice if I don't know whose voice it is? Right. What do you think? No, that's still Scottish. What do you think you're doing? A familiar voice snarled. Kyoshi grimaced and opened her eyes. Peace was no longer an option, because now Rangi was here. Rangi must have seen them from afar and stalked across the entire great lawn unnoticed, or lain in ambush for them all night, or dropped out of a tree like a webbed leopard. Kyoshi wouldn't have put any of those feats past the military-trained firebender. Jay and Sius, oh my god, Suzu backed away, trying to swallow their hostile intent like children, stuffing stolen candy into their mouths. It occurred to Kyoshi that this might have been the first time that they ever seen a member of the Fire Nation up close, let alone one as intimidating as Rangi. In her form-fitting armor, the colors of red and dried blood, she could have been a vengeful spirit come to clean the battlefield of the living. Atoma, rather impressively, held her ground. The Avatar's bodyguard, she said with a faint smile. I thought you weren't supposed to leave his side. Are you slacking off? She glanced to the left and right. Or is he here somewhere? Rangi looked at Atoma like she was a wad of foulness the firebender had stepped in during the walkover. You're not authorized to be on these grounds, she said in her charred rasp. She pointed upwards at the jar of kelp. Nor to lay your hands on the Avatar's property.
Jianju.
Oh, sorry. I hit enter. Or was it spacebar?
Jianju.
It's spacebar I hit. Lay your hands on the Avatar's property, or accost his household staff for that matter. Kyoshi noticed she personally landed a distant third in that list of considerations. Atoma tried to play it cool. This container is enormous, she said, struggled to emphasize her still ongoing feat of element control. It would take 2 grown men to lift it without earthbending. Kyoshi asked us to help her bring it inside the house, right? She gave Kyoshi a radiant smile, one that said, "Tell me and I'll kill you." Kyoshi had seen that expression before countless times when they were younger. Whenever a helpless adult blundered into the two of them playing around town, Kyoshi badly scraped up an Atoma with a rock in her hand. But today she was off her game. Her normally flawless acting had a plaintive, genuine tone to it. Kyoshi suddenly understood what was going on. Atoma really did want to help her with her delivery. She wanted to be invited inside the mansion to see the Avatar up close, like Kyoshi got to every day. She was jealous. A feeling akin to pity settled in Kyoshi's throat. It wasn't strong enough to hold Rangi back from doing her thing, though. The firebender stepped forwards. Her fine jawline hardened, with her dark bronze eyes danced with aggression. The air around her body rippled like a living migraine. Like a living mirage, making the strands of jet black hair that escaped her top knot float upward. Strands of jet black hair that escaped her top knot float upwards in the heat. Put that jar down, walk away, and don't come back, she said. Unless you want to know what the ashes of your eyebrows smell like. Atoma's expression crumbled. She blundered into a predator with much larger fangs. And unlike the adults of the village, no amount of charm or misdirection would work on Rangi. But that didn't mean a parting shot was out of the question. Sure, she said. Thought you'd never ask. With a fling of her hands, the jar rocketed straight up into the air, past the treetops. You better find someone who's authorized to catch that. She bolted down the path with Shizu and Jay close behind. You little! Rangi made to go after them, fist reflexively cocked to serve a helping of flaming pain. But she checked herself, Fiery vengeance would have to wait. She shook her hand out and peered up at the rapidly shrinking jar. Atoma had thrown it really, really hard. No one could claim the girl wasn't talented. Stretch me leg. Take a sip as well. Fiery vengeance would have to wait. She shook her hand out and peered up at the rapidly shrinking jar. Atoma had thrown it really, really hard. No one could claim the girl wasn't talented. Rangi elbowed Kyoshi simply in the side. "Catch it," she said. "Use earthbending and catch it." I can't, Kyoshi said, wavering with dismay. Her poor doomed charge reached the apex of its flight. Auntie May was going to be furious. A disaster of this magnitude might get back to Master Jiansu. Her pay would get cut or she'd be fired outright. Rangi hadn't given up on her. "What do you mean you can't?" "The staff ledgers have you listed..." "What do you mean you can't? The staff ledgers have you listed as an earthbender. Catch it." "It's not that simple." Yes, Kyoshi was technically a bender, but Rangi didn't know about her little problem. "Do the things with your hands like she did." Rangi formed the dual claws of Crowning Bridge, as if the only missing component was a crude visual reminder by a bender who wielded a different element entirely. "Look out!" Kyoshi screamed. She threw herself over Rangi. Shielding the smaller girl with her body from the plummeting missile. They fell to the ground, entwined. No impact came, no deadly shards of thymeric or explosion of tickling liquid. "Get off me, you oaf!" Rangi muttered. She hammered her fists against Kyoshi's protective embrace. A bird beating its wings against a cage. Kyoshi got to her knees and saw that her face and ears were as nearly as red as her armor. She helped Rangi to her feet. The jar floated next to them. Waist high above the ground, under Atoma's control, it had wavered and trembled, following her natural patterns of breathing and involuntary motions. But now it was completely still in the air, as if it had been placed on a sturdy iron pedestal. The pebbles in the dusty path trembled. They began to move, and now it bounced in front of Kyoshi's feet, directed by unseen power from below, like they had been scattered across the surface of a beating drum. They marched in seemingly random directions, little drunken soldiers, until they came to rest in a formation that spelled a message. "You're welcome." Kyoshi's head jerked up, and she squinted at the distant mansion. There was only one person she knew who could have managed this feat. The pebbles began their dance again, settling into words much faster this time. "This is Yun, by the way. You know, Avatar Yun." As if it could have been anyone else, Kyoshi couldn't spot where Yun was watching them. But she could manage the playful, teasing smirk on his handsome face as he performed yet another astounding act of bending like it was no big deal, charming the rocks into complete submission. She'd never heard of anyone using Earth to communicate legibly at a distance. Yun was lucky he wasn't an air nomad, or else the stunt would have gotten him tattooed in celebration for inventing a new technique. What are my what are my three favorite what's going on here? What are my three favorite ladies doing today? Kyoshi giggled. Okay, so not let's read this again. It's not speech, it's the rocks. What are my three favorite ladies doing today? Kyoshi giggled. Okay, not so perfectly legibly, as ladies was spelt wrong. Sounds like fun. Wish I could join you. He knows we can't reply, right? Rangi said. Dumplings, please. Any kind but leek. Enough! Rangi shouted. We're distracting him from his training, and you're late for work. She swept away the pebbles with her foot, less concerned with blazing new trails in the world of earthbending, and more with maintaining the daily schedule. Kyoshi plucked the jar off the invisible platform and followed Rangi back to the mansion, stepping slowly through the grass, so as to not outpace her. If household duties were all that mattered to the firebender, then that would be the end of it, and nothing more would need to be said. Instead, she could feel Rangi's silence compacting into a denser form inside her slender frame. They were halfway to the gate once it became too much to bear. It's pathetic, Rangi said, without turning around. The only way she could manage her disgust with Kyoshi was by not looking at her. The way they step on you. You serve the Avatar. Have some dignity. Kyoshi smiled. I was trying to de-escalate the situation. You were going to let them hit you. I saw it. And don't you dare try to claim that you weren't doing neutral jing or whatever earthbending mihui. Right on cue, Rangi had transformed from professional guardian of the Avatar ready to scorch the bones of the interlopers without flinching, into the teenage girl no older than Kyoshi, who easily lost her temper at her friends and was a kind of raging mother hen to boot. And speaking of your earthbending, you were shown up by a peasant. How have you not mastered the basics by now? I've seen children in young Dio bend rocks bigger than that jar. She and Rangi were friends, despite what it looked like. Back when the mansion was under construction, while Kyoshi was learning her duties inside the skeleton of the unfinished house, it had taken her weeks to figure out the imperialist girl, who acted like she was still in the junior corps of the fire army, only yelled at people she let inside her shell. Everyone else was scum who didn't warrant the effort. So the most... who's talking? So the most efficient course of action would be to surprise the leader. Amora, was it? Alone somewhere, and then destroy her so messily that sends a message to the others, not to bother you anymore. Are you listening to me? Kyoshi had missed the greater part of the battle plan. She'd been distracted by the collar of Rangi's armor, which had been muzzled in the fall and needed to be straightened. So it covered the delicate skin of her nape once more. But her answer was the same regardless. But why resort to violence? He said, gently. She nudged the firebender in the small of her back with the jar. I have strong heroes like you to protect me. I have strong heroes like you to protect me. Rangi made a noise, like she wanted to vomit. Ugh. So that's the end of the chapter there. The next one is The Boy from Makapu. We got through 24 pages there. And how long have I been going? I'm going over an hour. I expected it would be about an hour. You can tell I'm starting to lose cohesion in some of the words. even that sentence there. So I might give it a break. Like, I started this with a scratchy voice, and now my voice is even scratchier. So I'll take the bookmark out of where I was many months ago, forgetting that progress, and it's gone. And then I'll insert the bookmark into page 24. Then well, I hope to return to this. I'm very lazy at streaming, but when I do return to this, I hope we'll start on the chapter "The Boy from Makapu." Like, we're like, I'd say 1/12 through the book. There's a few hundred pages, 500. So yeah, we're almost 10% the way through, I guess. Well, not really. We're 5% the way through almost. But yeah, now the plan is what to do next. But I hope that was legible enough. I believe it was. The writing in the book is a bit funny sometimes. Like not knowing who's talking till after the sentence. That's the thing. You like the Scottish. Yeah, for some reason I kept defaulting to Scottish. But I remember reading through this book last time, and like, I think I did spot a mistake in it. There's like a word missing out from the sentence, which I do all the time, but to have it in a book is a bit unprofessional. But yeah, still a good book. It paints the picture of the Avatar world well. We had Kelsang and Kelsang and
Jianju.
Looking for the Avatar girl. With no luck. Then they went through dozens of children, and the homeless girl was like spying on the whole affair. And then like offered her a toy. She took it, then ran away. And then 7 years later, we're back with Kyoshi, who was that little girl. And it appears she's working in the mansion now. And she's made a few friends. But she's not the Avatar. She's just working at the mansion. While there appears to be Yun, who is an Avatar. And that's kind of the progress we're at. There's a few other finer details, such as she gets bullied and stuff. Any sort of standard, like, early character development. You know, you gotta build them up. But yeah, we're still in the earthbending phase. Once we get to the fire phase, then that'll come up. And then obviously, if there is a water phase, I know that. That's about where I gave up in the book, but by the time I get Adobe back, we'll see if I can fix this little one. This little transition there. But yeah, that's Coffee with Cow. That is Coffee with Cow. Now, the stream hasn't been going for long, so I'm gonna look at potential other stuff to do. Potential other things. But I'm glad I did that. Like, it was either that or just like freaking waste the time in bed. Let me just look at things. Look at certain things. The other thing that I was looking at was potentially the Walking Dead games. Because that's a very much non-speaking game, because they're doing all the speaking. The thing with that is, I I've played through Season 1 and Season 2 of them games twice. So, I don't know if I want to start from the very beginning, because I brought all the games in like a bundle or something. All the Telltale games.
Is all it takes to register to vote in the upcoming local elections.
And
So if you've never registered or have
I
recently
was
moved
like,
house,
I
visit
played through Season 1 and 2 twice, so
by the 17th of
playing through them again is a bit of a slog.
Don't lose it.
I mean, kind of know the story. So I'm thinking maybe I'll just jump right to Frontiers. I think that's the third season. So I might do that. And what I might do quickly is end the stream then start another one. I'm gonna do that. What time is it? Right. Oh, I don't even have that Walking Dead game installed, so not really a plan for tonight. What's something else I can do? I don't have that game installed. What do I have installed? Let's build a zoo game. It's pretty chill. And I only played this game at release, so I'm not sure. As I think about it, yeah, I'm looking at Let's Build a Zoo, and that's probably what's interesting me the most right now. It's a low impact game. It doesn't take a lot to run. It's Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy, the David Cage game, but there's like quick time events with like glowing like lights, multicolored glowing lights. And, like I can get the left one, but I've no idea. It never tells you what the right one, what the right controls are. But I wouldn't want to play that from the beginning either, because I'm partly way through it. From like when I started playing it ages ago. Yeah, let's build a zoo. Let's build a zoo. Right. So what I'm probably gonna do right now is end the stream and then restart the stream. It'll be an instant. I just want the reading thing as a separate VOD, just to slap that on YouTube. Just as a memory, as a little diary. So let me go to the website twitch.tv real quick and just look at my channel. And I need to confirm that the stream ends and like makes the different VOD. Alright, so if I go here, OBS, it was relatively easy on the OBS side, just needed chat and then OBS. Yeah, the stream's gonna quickly end, then restart.